Welcome back. All right, so we're going to do a news of the day video now for your Monday, June the 19th. We are, of course, 9 days away from the NHL draft. A few days after that, we're going to see free agency. It's going to be a busy time. That being said, the Vancouver Canucks, of course, stirred up a lot of discussion when they bought out Oliver Ekman-Larsson. Now the question becomes, who are they going to try to add? Are they done subtracting money? Odds are I would think that they'll look to move another contract if they can. But there's some talk about whether or not they're going to add. I know third line centers where they covet picking up a player. Their blue line, I think they figure that Hronek's going to jump in and be that top four defenseman they need this year, and maybe add another defenseman. But yeah, there's definitely a thin defense there. Or they could always just give Wolanin an actual chance this year. I know it sounds crazy, but give Wolanin an actual shot, Vancouver. He's pretty good. Anyways, Connor Bedard, moving on. Connor Bedard, named the IIHF male athlete of the year this year, and he had a very good year when he played for Team Canada. So he ends up being the athlete of the year for the CHL. He ends up being the athlete of the year for the IIHF. He's pretty good. So Chicago should be pretty happy when they draft him in 9 days. There's no question whether or not they're going to draft him, but yeah, Bedard's had a great year, and he just keeps adding more and more accolades. He may be one of those people who needs a trophy room. If somebody comes into his house, this is a nice house. You don't have any of your trophies. We actually have a room for that. So anyways, we'll see how things go for Bedard. There's a lot of hype, but I do think he's going to live up to it. We'll find out soon enough. Valeri Nichushkin. So an incident that, takes place during the playoffs where there's a woman he's not dating that ends up in his hotel. And he does have a woman in his life as it is. So that makes things kind of awkward. Other than being kind of a gossipy sort of situation, I haven't seen anything criminal in this. I'm not saying there may not have been something criminal somewhere, but police didn't press any charges. And there's no reason to think that the NHL was going to suspend him, which of course the NHL said, we're not suspending him. There's nothing there. And now it's been revealed that he'll attend training camp for the Avs, which, well, yeah, he's under contract. I would hope he'd attend training camp. Now, I do think that the players, his teammates, I think they're going to have some questions, and I think rightfully so. I think some questions are going to be asked about, so you took off on us, what was that all about? Because he didn't play in those games against Seattle where they desperately needed him, and so I would imagine he has something to answer for. He hasn't said anything publicly that I've seen, so again, it'll be interesting when he's in front of reporters. If he gives any kind of answer at all, my guess is there's going to be no comment. My guess is that the Avs themselves are going to say, hey, don't even ask about it. That'd be my guess. But at any rate, Nichushkin will attend training camp, and that will probably be a sticking point for some of his teammates. I would think for at least a few. You were gone. What's going on? What the heck? You couldn't wait till the off season to do whatever. Anyways, we'll see what happens there. So the Winnipeg Ice, I mentioned this in a video I did a little over a week ago now, I do believe, where there was some talk about them being bought by Francesco Aquilini and being moved to Chilliwack, which I thought was a terrible idea. And the Winnipeg Ice have been sold, and they're moving to Wenatchee, Washington. So we get another team in Washington State. That's good news for Spokane. It's good news for Everett. These are teams that now will have another, team that's geographically closer. And honestly, for the Ice, it's good news too, because being in Winnipeg left them pretty far away from a lot of other teams. Keeping in mind that Manitoba's nowhere near BC. And so, yeah, for the schedule maker, this should make things easier too, right? So the Winnipeg Ice now move to Wenatchee, Washington. And so we'll see how things go. You don't change the name. You don't change the jerseys. You don't change anything. You just, instead of them being Winnipeg, they now become Wenatchee. It even starts with a W. So it's perfect. And again, Chilliwack gets to keep the Chilliwack Chiefs. And no concerns about Chilliwack having to change anything or the Chiefs finding themselves homeless again. Keeping in mind that the Chilliwack Bruins pushed them out and they ended up in Langley before returning to Chilliwack. So tonight in the AHL, the only series that's still going on in North America, maybe even around the globe, to be honest, when it comes to ice hockey. Tonight it's Game 6. Coachella Valley's the home team against Hershey. The home team's won the first 5 games. I, of course, will be watching this game tonight. Starts at 7 o'clock Pacific, 10 o'clock Eastern. I watch it on AHL TV. It's not being carried in Canada, which I still think is a mistake. I think if TSN was able to show these games, they should. I think if Sportsnet's able to show these games, they should. I'm kind of surprised that they don't, because I understand, you've got other sports going now. people are still going to watch AHL hockey. It's a championship game tonight. I think people would watch. But Decourt is not allowed a goal in Coachella Valley. So on the road in Hershey kind of figured him out, but he had back-to-back shutouts in games 1 and 2. Can he get that form back in game 6? We shall see tonight. Coachella Valley has to win both, or both tonight and on Wednesday, or else we're going to see Hershey take home another championship. They haven't had one in a while, but in terms of Calder Cups, Hershey, they're the champions of the champions. So speaking of which, with Coachella Valley, you've got Shane Wright. Shane Wright has looked good. I've watched the 2 games so far. He's looked good. His passing's on point. He's not getting goals that I think you'd want with him being a top prospect, but he's getting assists, he's getting ice time, and he's playing well. But this highlights the problem. The problem is that because of his age, once the regular season next year rolls around, he's either in the NHL or he's back in the OHL again. This is a comment that we've had going since before the most recent CBA went through, that maybe it is time for the CBA to be amended so that teams can hold players of junior age in the AHL. And you could limit it to 1 per team. You could limit it to a maximum of 32 players, and not all teams would use it, right? Where you could send a guy to the CHL, or you could send him to the AHL if you think his development would be better suited to that league. We definitely saw in 2020 and 2021, when some of the junior leagues were shut down, that junior age players did well. And I think it showed that, for some of these guys that don't develop particularly well, or it takes them longer to make it to the NHL, maybe letting them play in the AHL instead of going back to juniors would be best for their development. And I think Wright is a good example of this, but because of his age, we're going to have this conversation again in the fall. And I think it's a shame. I'm not saying that Shane Wright's going to be a star. I'm not saying Shane Wright's going to live up to the heady expectations he had many years ago. When he dropped to number 4 in his draft last year, that was legit. That was seen coming too. That Shane Wright wasn't taking the kind of steps that were expected. But I think he's better off in Coachella Valley than he would be going back to juniors. I don't think he has anything left to prove in juniors. So we'll see if the CBA gets amended at any point, or if the NHL works something out with the CHL. You could work out some kind of a cash deal where if we hold a player in the AHL, this team gets $1 million for letting us keep him. And I think teams would pay that. I don't think it would be a big deal. And then that $1 million could go into player development at the junior level for that team that has lost that player. So it is a conversation. Let me know your thoughts, whether or not you think that there should be an allowance for junior age players to play in the American Hockey League. And again, I'm not saying all of them, because that's the concern. The reason this rule exists is because the CHL had a concern that NHL teams would draft their players and then just hold them in the AHL, and that the CHL would be gutted in terms of star players. Their ability to, develop star players would be hampered. And really, I think if you just allowed 1 player per team, that's only 32 players at most that would be affected. And of course, you have various junior leagues around North America. Now, again, I don't think that's going to change soon, but Shane Wright is an example of why I think they should look at changing it as soon as they can. One other thing I wanted to bring up in this, because there's all kinds of speculation. I don't do the speculation videos. For those who haven't noticed, I don't get into here's what I think Hellebuck's worth, here's what I think Scheifele's worth, here's what I think, and on and on and on. Because the reality is that people will always overrate talent on the team they cheer for. They will always also overrate players on other teams. I'm always surprised when I see fans, in comments, I really wish my team would pick up, and then the player they mention had an okay year, but the guy they want to give up to get the guy that they want instead isn't as good. And I'm thinking, so you didn't watch the other team, you're just looking at just the general stats and saying, well, clearly he's the better player, when he may very well not be. But I do wonder, with all of this speculation and all this talk from media and just amongst fans, are we being set up for great disappointment on draft day? Are we going to see, and we've seen this before, where there's all this talk about teams moving up, moving down, who's going to get moved, and then it doesn't happen. Sometimes it doesn't happen till day 2. So you have the first round on day 1, and sometimes teams just decide to stand pat and not make those moves. And then on day 2, when it's rounds 2 through 7, you might get more liberal movement between teams when it comes to players. But I do wonder if we're being set up for disappointment, because there's some big names out there for potential trades. You know, are we going to see Nylander? Are we going to see Matthews? Are we going to see, like, it's just ridiculous, right? But it's out there. It sells because, again, you know, people will click on these articles. They will discuss this. But again, for me, I don't think any of that ages very well. Big part of it is just I don't think that would age well. If I did a video on trade speculation, sure, I could get 40, 50,000 views on it, depending on the player. But then a week from then, either it's possible that video is completely irrelevant or it just looks silly, just looks ridiculous. So, because we may see that player get re-signed, maybe teams that are speculated upon do something completely different, and then that video just doesn't matter. It's gone. It's in the ether and out. So I try to make sure that the stuff I put up has a little more to it when it comes to, you know, maybe a year down the road, maybe it's interesting to watch kind of thing, right? But anyways, are we being set up for disappointment on draft day? I'm going to say yes. I'm going to say yes. That once draft day, and I'm not saying don't attend the live stream we're going to have that day because it's going to be fun, but I do think we're being set up for some disappointment here. Absolutely. And I do wonder, you know, which teams are going to make moves and which ones aren't. And there's always teams that make moves we don't expect, and there's always teams that we expect to make big moves that don't. So here's my question for you today. And again, you can leave the comment below and you can come back to it in a week and a half and go, I called it. Remember though, if you edit your comment, we can see that it's been edited and then it just doesn't matter. Which team do you think we're talking a lot about that's going to make a big trade that's not between now and July 1st? And which team do you think will make a big trade that we're not talking about? There's a question for you. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.